there, everyone. Welcome to the Path Podcast. I am Derrick.
And I am Jason.
You're listening to episode 143 of the Path Podcast. And I get to be your host today because Jason shared with us yesterday from the Great Commission. We're in our Last Words series where we're looking at the things that the Lord said in his last days here on the earth, and many of those are on the cross, but a couple of them are after he has resurrected from the dead and given instructions to his followers, and this is one of those. So Jason, why don't you walk us through what we learned yesterday about the Great Commission and how it corresponds to the cross of Christ and all the things that you shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the opportunity to get to dig in deeper to passages that most people are pretty familiar with, because I think that sometimes we get so familiar with passages that it's like, oh yeah, I know that. I've talked about that before, or I've studied that before. But I think it's good just to dig in. Like we'll get to something that I had never studied before concerning this passage here in just a second. But yeah, we talked about how coming off of last week and the powerful words that Jesus says at the cross when he says, "It is finished." That those words are what empower these words that we read in the Great Commission at the end of Matthew's Gospel. And I love that this is the way that Matthew ends his Gospel. I mean, the very last words in the entire book of Matthew is, "I am with you always to the end of the age." And those are the words of Jesus. They're in red, right? So they're important. And so I think that it's important to remember that, knowing that the reason that we are looking at the Great Commission after it is finished is because it is finished is what makes the Great Commission possible. And so that was why yesterday we looked at all the points are because of Jesus' work on the cross, this. Because of his work on the cross, this, and because of the work on the cross, this. And what Jesus did at the cross is what it's what opens up all the avenues for his disciples to be able to do the things that he commands them to do, which I think is a really important thing to not lose sight of, that it's not just some arbitrary command, but it is a command that Jesus gives because he has the authority to give it. He's the only one who has the authority to give it. And so that was the first thing we looked at, was that because of Jesus' work on the cross, all authority has been given to him. Jesus has all authority. And this is where we get into, right at the beginning, of, like in verse 17, something that I hadn't studied before, because the verse 17 says, "And when they saw him," when the disciples saw Jesus, "they worshipped him, but some doubted." And it's like, what in the world does that even mean? Like, why is that there? I've heard a pastor give a joke before of like, he's like, there was a disciple standing there, was like, "I got a cousin who can do the same thing, like as Jesus is ascended into heaven," or whatever. And it's like, well, but what's happening here? And digging into a word study of the Greek words was that it's a Greek verb that's only used one other time in the entire New Testament. So it's like, okay, well, that changes things a little bit, and that it's that idea of hesitation. And I can identify with that because I trust the Lord to the utmost, but there are times where I face things in my life that I go, but why? Like, why like this, Lord? Or hold on, what are we doing here? God, you got to help me understand what's happening here. And so I can understand that of these disciples who, Galilee and Jerusalem are not right beside each other. They're miles apart from each other. And especially at a time when the only way you get somewhere is either on horseback or by foot, it's a long way from Jerusalem to Galilee. And these men had seen Jesus die. They knew he was dead. They knew he was in the grave. And now they're miles away from where they saw him die. And there he is, standing there talking to him. And so I think it's important to kind of put some humanity on those disciples for a minute and just be like, yeah, I would probably be a little like, what in the world is happening if I were there too? And so just that's one of those kind of peeling back the layers of the onion on a passage that if you have any history in church, you're familiar with the Great Commission. And so being able to just kind of have a different outlook on that, because knowing that the only other time that verb that's translated doubted is used is earlier in Matthew 14 when Peter has walked out on the water and Jesus says, why did you distazo, or why did you doubt, or why did you hesitate? And Jesus, Peter is walking towards Jesus and looking at Jesus, and when he looks at the storm, he starts to sink, and so he hesitates in walking out to the Lord, and that just brings a little bit different connotation to that word.
I think that's super helpful too for us as we think about, and you mentioned this yesterday, and really helped us see, our marching orders. And this is just something, if we're Bible believing Christians, if we trust the Lord Jesus Christ as our Savior, this is what we have to do.
Absolutely.
It's not like a hey, you can do this part if you want to.
Yeah, it's not a suggestion.
These are what He's called us to do. I thought you did a great job with that, with kind of looking at, if you're on the fire force, you get called out, your commanding officer is going to give you things to do. You got to do them. If you're in some type of military situation, your commanding officer tells you what to do. You got to do it. Well, that's what's happening here.
It's the exact same
I think
thing,
it's so clear. But I love that Matthew captures this idea of hesitation, or this kind of idea of, and looking at it with Peter, Peter had faith. He's like, hey, Lord, command me to come walk out on the water with you. I mean,
right.
No one else had that kind of faith.
Right. Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah.
But he got distracted, right? He saw all the stuff around him. He got distracted, and I think that happens to us too, right?
Absolutely.
We forget, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. There are hesitations in us. And so it's here's the humanity of the disciples, even seeing Jesus, nail scarred, he asked Thomas to, hey, do you want to touch the spear where the spear went in? Here he is, miraculously. Yet there's wow, what are we, what are we doing?
Is this
here,
really happening?
So to me, that speaks to me to say, okay, there are hesitations there.
Yeah.
But they don't have to be, because here, all authority has been given to me,
Yeah.
Another thing in this passage I thought about was just, what Jesus did on the cross. I love that you captured each point because of his work on the cross, right? So I'm reminded of what Paul said in Philippians 2.
Yeah.
He said, I'll just read, starting in verse 5, adopt the same attitude as that of Christ Jesus, who existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant, taking on the likeness of humanity. And when he had come as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even to death on a cross.
Yeah.
For this reason, God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Yeah.
For this reason, for the cross.
Yeah.
So when Jesus comes and says, hey, all authority has been given to me, it is because of the work that he accomplished on the cross.
That's right.
And so even though we might have our hesitations, we can submit ourselves to that authority in our lives. So.
Yeah. Well, and one of the beautiful things in both of those passages, in Matthew 14 and in this one, is that we can know that even though we will have hesitations, that's a common human experience, there's grace for that. Like when Peter doubts and when he hesitates and he starts to sink, Jesus doesn't let him drown. He lifts him up. And when here in Matthew 28, when some worship and some doubted, he doesn't go, get these guys out of here. Yeah. He just starts with, hey, all authority's been given to me. He doesn't berate them. He consoles them with, hey, listen, I see your hesitations, but let me remind you why you don't need to have those hesitations, because all authority has been given to me. So you can trust in me, and also there's grace. I'm not going to condemn you for your hesitation. And I think that's a beautiful thing to remember, is that we're humans. Like we're gonna struggle at times to believe even what we're seeing, what's right in front of our face, going, I don't know if I trust my eyes right now. Like what I'm seeing here, this is crazy. But Jesus is here to say, hey, there's grace, and I have authority, so you can trust me, which is a beautiful thing, because everything else that he says, he can say based on that authority that he has. The marching orders that he gives are ones that we must follow because he has all authority. He's the, we used the terminology yesterday, he's the commanding officer. And so we have to obey him and do what he says, because to your point, like you said just a while ago, this is not the great suggestion. It's the great commandment. It's something that we have to do. And so, the second thing that we saw was that because of Jesus' work on the cross, he gives his disciples a mission. And that mission, we did a little bit of an English study for a few minutes, but the command is make disciples. That's the imperative verb in the sentence, is make disciples. And going, baptizing, and teaching are the ways that command is carried out. And so, I think that in my mind, it's not like there's nothing revolutionary in that. It just helps, I think, to understand that this is the primary objective. Our primary objective as followers of Christ is to make disciples, to replicate ourselves, to be disciples who make disciples. And then Jesus helps us with going, because you could hear, if he had just said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, make disciples, you'd be like, okay, how? How do we do that? But he expands that, like the definition of that, or the explanation of go make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them everything that I've taught you. And so that's a little bit better of going, oh, okay, well that at least gives me some some steps to move forward with. And that mission is one that it's hard, because you look at it and go, how do we overcome the world? How do we fight back against the things that are battling for people's attention? And you have to go back to the first sentence that Jesus says, all authority has been given to me. I'm going to go with you. I am telling you to do this, and I'm also empowering you to do this. It's not just hey, good luck, go get it done. This is what I want you to do. It's, hey, I want you to go do this, and I'm going to be with you to go do this. And so we have this incredible mission, and it's why we do what we do here at Lafayette First. The activities that we plan, or the events that we do, the mission trips that we plan, are opportunities for us to go, opportunities for us to teach, opportunities for us to bring people to baptism, and all of those things as we walk along the journey of making disciples. And I think one of the things that, unfortunately, especially in the American church, we've gotten this idea that making disciples is like a 6 to 10 week process, because that's how curriculum is handed to us. And that's not how it works. It is the long, arduous journey of walking with someone, and they're discipling you as you're discipling them, and we're walking together in community toward Christ. And that's hard, because we live in a microwave society that wants things quick, and you just want to be like, made my disciple, check that off the box. All right, we did it. But it's a long process. I mean, you don't have to look any further than the disciples. They spent 3 years with Jesus, not just some guy. They spent 3 years with Jesus, and they still struggled to get it.
Oh yeah, so they doubted. Some doubted.
Yeah, some doubted. Yeah, and so I think we need to switch in our minds this idea that making disciples is a quick process. Because one of the things we talked about yesterday was that the mission is not to make converts. The mission is not to talk about Jesus. The mission is not to start new churches. Although all of those things will be a byproduct of making disciples, they're not the primary objective. The objective is to make disciples, and that's a long game. That's not the quick thing that happens, and so I think that being reminded of that it's going to be difficult at times. It's going to take a long time. That's a good reminder sometimes, because I think it's easy that if you look at just like a week span or even a month span and go, oh, I'm not making disciples. And it's like, well, hold on. Like, maybe there's some things you need to change in the way that you're doing this. Yes. But also understand that this is a years long process. It's a journey. It's not a quick trip, which I think is something that we forget sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we live in a society that is a microwave society. I mean, it's things like a microwave exist, or now, Siri or Alexa, where you can...
It's instantaneous.
Yeah, actually, your phone
Siri,
heard me say Siri, and so it popped up.
Thanks for talking to her.
All you have to do is just ask, and they will tell you, usually something. And
right.
So, but that's just not how this works. It's,
right.
And I think even church growth sometimes, like things that are, out there, maybe has worked in a couple places or whatever, but like, is it really prescriptive for how every church should do this particular thing, and you're going to automatically grow or whatever? And it's like, sometimes I think those like quick fixes or quick, like, let's, get a bunch of people here, makes us feel like we're doing the Great Commission, when maybe we somewhat are, but maybe not to the full extent. It's just a long road.
Yeah, I think it's hard because, like in the book of Acts, we have like the Church of Jerusalem where 5,000 people are saved in one day. But for every church in Jerusalem experience, there's 1,000 10-member house churches that are growing really slowly. That you're right, because like, and I'm not meaning to say that the book of Acts is like a newspaper, but like, those ones that explode are the ones that get the press. And those are not normative. Those are typically outliers. Like, that's not the experience for every church across the globe. I'm excited for those things when God does those incredible works. I mean, it's awesome to watch, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen where we are.
Well, even if it were, if you don't have a systematized way to disciple those folks,
absolutely, it's all for naught.
They're going to fall off eventually. I wonder how many. I mean, because you're talking about like, no one foresaw 3,000 people coming to the Lord. So those apostles were scrambling. I mean, you get a picture of how much they were scrambling in Acts chapter 6, because they're like, we need some help. We're supposed to be like leading in prayer and spiritual development, and we're having to figure out who's going to wipe this table down. And so I think that's because of this enormous growth and the understanding we've got to disciple these people. And what you don't see in grand pieces is how many of those people left the faith too. And maybe they didn't, but chances are they did, because you do see a picture here and there. You see like Ananias and Sapphira, right? Who were there, but they weren't in it for the right reasons. They left by death. But then you see like, John Mark falls off. You see Paul talking about Demas and others, that were converts, were following, were pretty heavy heart,
working with the Apostle Paul,
hot and heavy disciples of the Apostle Paul or others, and then they're gone, and so that is all a part of it too. But you don't see those things because you're right. It's kind of hot off the presses, big bold headlines, but and I guess all that to say, to your point, is that it just all takes time.
It does.
It's not a quick fix. It's a long process.
Sure. And that's not to say that you just sit and wait on God to do everything. we've been called to action. That was when we talked about how the direct response to marching orders is action, and it may just be doing the same action over and over again for an extended period of time.
A lot of the times that is what it is.
Yeah.
And you have to leave the results to the Lord. I think that's
Absolutely.
kind of the third point is that as we go under His authority. We don't have to have hesitations.
Right.
We go and we do the things He's called us to do, primarily make disciples, and here's the various ways that we do that.
Yeah.
But then we do it, with Him there with us.
Right.
And
that's exactly right.
I don't want to take your...
You're right. We are encouraged by Jesus that He's going to go with us. It's not... Because you can see how the disciples would look at that command and be like, golly, Jesus, that's a big task, And He doesn't say, well, good luck with it. Off you go. He says, hey, I'm going to be with you. I'm going with you always. I'll be with you. And I think that's where the trust aspect comes in. You're right that so many times we find ourselves in the church frustrated because we want to try to hold on to a responsibility that's not ours. It's not our responsibility to save people. It's our responsibility to share the gospel and then make disciples. And Jesus is the one who saves people, not us. And so let's trust that Jesus is doing what He said He was going to do. Instead of trying to muster up, the most compelling argument or the most attractive presentation. Trust Jesus. There's no way that you can make the gospel cooler than it is. Like there's the gospel is what it is, and it's powerful because of what Jesus did at the cross. So.
And I've seen this, and I'm sure you have too. I've seen this in my own personal life, but even as a pastor leading others, I've seen where this comes. It's this beautiful thing, right? When we can come in obedience to the Lord and trust in the Lord, and just say, Lord, I'm going to leave the results to you. I'm going to do what you've called me to do. I'm going to leave the results to you. I remember in high school being trepidatious about sharing the gospel with someone who was living an openly disobedient lifestyle, who kind of grew up in the church. And I remember just saying, okay, Lord, I want to be the hands and feet of Jesus. I feel compelled for whatever reason to speak with this person. And not knowing what in the world that person was going to ask me or say against me or bring the rebuttals against me, just feeling like I needed to be obedient. And, I walked away from that. The guy didn't change his life, but I felt like the Lord gave me what I needed in that moment to be able to speak to Him and do what the Lord had called me to do. Most recently, in our mission trip to Augusta, we were there with another group, and some of our group had never been on a mission trip like this, where it's basically street evangelism. You're going and you're trying to drum up conversation with people at their home or on the street, which can be daunting and arduous,
Sure.
And so everyone was like looking to me like, you're the pastor, so you're on our team, so you can go and talk. I was like, well, I will, but like y'all can do it too, and we'll help you, And what was so cool, man, is these folks from several from another church, but a couple from ours, who were just real nervous, and I get it. I was too. I've done this many times, but I was still nervous.
Right.
But what I saw was that their confidence got built up. That the Lord was with us. The Lord gave us the words and the way to operate in every situation. Where they were, hesitant maybe, to use the Greek word. All those hesitations faded when they trusted that the Lord was leading them, and they were going in His presence. I'm with you, and that's it. He's with us, and so sometimes we just have to step out on that limb. But the Lord's leading us to speak to someone, or pray for someone, or engage someone in a way that He's going to give us what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. To kind of wrap up that point was that the Great Commission is not. It's not a task that's only given to pastors. It's not a task that's only given to people who are really outgoing. It's not a task who's given to people who just are super excited. It's a task for all believers. If we are a follower of Christ, we are commanded to go make disciples. And that's something we need to remember. That now that looks different for everyone. That it's a different process for everybody. but it doesn't mean that anyone gets to shirk that responsibility. We're all called to make disciples. So.
Well, and we as a church, our theme this year is sent to serve. So we are providing opportunities for one.
Yeah.
And most of those are here locally. Some of those are
abroad.
Various, some in the States, some a couple states away, and then 10 hours away in Buenos Aires, Argentina. But all that to say is, not everybody's called to Buenos Aires. There's a team of 6 of us. Not everybody's called to go on the Augusta trip. There were like 15, something like that of us. Not everyone's going to go to Kentucky, but everyone's called to do something.
Yeah.
And it, like, what the Lord may be empowering you to do, giving you the authority to do, giving you His presence to do, and the mission to do, is just go across the street to your neighbor.
Absolutely.
And it may not look like, hey, do you know Jesus Christ? And would you like to believe in Him today? It may look like, knock, 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 here's a plate of cookies. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, but I'm your neighbor, and I love Jesus, and I'd love to get to know you.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can pray for you about? It may not be like, well, let me give you the Romans road of salvation today. It could be. I mean, the Lord could lead to that. I don't know. I've had those moments where that happened to me, but the Lord is calling you to at least go so that you can figure out, is this a person I can make a disciple?
Right.
I love that you said that. Like, the imperative is go. The command is go, or is to make disciples, and it's as you are going.
Yeah.
So how do we do it? We go.
Yeah.
We go, and we just go across the street, or we go to Argentina, or we go to we're going to do a mission trip, just a one-day mission trip here in town.
Yeah.
But you have to go.
Right.
To follow the command.
Yep.
And a part of that, you'll teach. There'll even be some baptisms along the way.
Yeah.
And that, I think Jesus, it's almost like He's the Lord of heaven. It's
almost like all authority has been given to Him. Yeah. Yeah. Almost.
He knew what to tell us to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then even reassured us to say, "I'm going to be with you." So I love that.
Yeah, good stuff.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love for you to continue just to engage with us. We'd love for you to subscribe, like, do all the things to follow this podcast wherever you follow podcasts, either audio or we're on YouTube as well if you'd like to watch. Invite your friends to join in on this conversation as well. We'd love for that to be the case. We'd love to hear from you directly. The way you can do that is to email us at thepath@lafayettefirst.life. Those come straight to both of us. We'd love to engage in that way with you. And we hope that you'll continue to follow with us along the path next time. For now, I'm Derrick.
And I'm Jason.
And we'll see you next time.